right, welcome back, everybody. We're diving deep today into the life of Charles Babe Barron, a guy who, well, kind of led a double life right in the heart of Chicago during, all that organized crime and political machine stuff.
Chicago.
Yeah, and we've got some excerpts here from his Wikipedia entry. And let me tell you, this is going to be a wild one.
Can't wait.
Okay, so get this. He owned a successful Ford dealership.
Okay.
But he was also a big shot in the Chicago outfit. Illegal gambling. So how does someone pull that off?
Well, it's all about appearances.
Appearances?
Yeah, like maintaining this facade of being totally legitimate. It was a pretty common tactic back then for organized crime.
So it's like a cover.
Exactly. A cover. Having a successful business, it gave them a way to hide their illegal activities, and it helped them move, in those powerful circles without raising too many eyebrows.
So it's not just about hiding the bad stuff. It's also about using the good stuff, the legit business, to gain influence.
Bingo. It's about access and perception. Guys like Barron they could rub shoulders with, politicians, business leaders, even law enforcement sometimes, all while, running their criminal empire behind the scenes.
And Barron, he was good at it. I mean, this guy wasn't just some car salesman. He was a brigadier general in the Illinois National Guard.
Wow.
Talk about a cover.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. A military leader, a successful businessman, and a major player in organized crime, all in one. Well, it really makes you wonder, how did he get to be so powerful in all these different worlds?
Right. It's like, it doesn't add up.
Yeah.
Well, we know he was like a protege.
Right.
Of Jacob Arvey, who is this powerful Democratic Party ward boss in Chicago. And he was connected to other big names, too, like Dave Yaris and Lenny Patrick.
Yeah.
So for those of us who, aren't exactly experts on Chicago politics back then, what exactly was a ward boss and how much power did these guys really have?
Well, think of it like this. The ward boss. He was like the king of his neighborhood.
Yeah.
He controlled everything from votes to jobs, even the police sometimes. They were the backbone of the political machine, the ones who got things done.
Got things done. Meaning?
Well, sometimes it was favors. Sometimes it was intimidation. And sometimes it was straight up corruption.
So Barron, through his connection with Arvey, he had like a direct line into all this power and influence.
Exactly. That connection probably gave him protection, opportunities, access to information that most people could only dream of. It's a textbook example of how organized crime used political connections to get what they wanted.
And speaking of connections, there's also Barron's link to Patrick Hoy, who worked for General Dynamics, and had ties to Sidney Korshak. At Korshak, he was a notoriously influential guy.
Oh, yeah.
What's the significance of that General Dynamics connection?
That's where things get really interesting. You see, General Dynamics, they were a major defense contractor.
Defense contractor. So we're talking like military stuff.
Exactly. Military stuff. This connection suggests that Barron's influence, it might have gone way beyond Chicago, maybe even into, national security.
Whoa.
Yeah, think about it.
Yeah.
Rigged contracts, insider information, maybe even influence over military decisions.
That's kind of scary.
It is. Makes you wonder how deep this whole thing really went.
And then there's the fact that this guy was arrested not once, but twice for murder.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
First in 1929, after a prize fight, when he shot and killed a bootlegger named James Walsh, and then again in 1933, accused of murdering Smiling Gus Winkler, a financier for the North Side Gang. That's some serious stuff.
Those were definitely different times.
2 murders. And yet, never convicted in either case. It's hard not to think that his connections, his influence, played a part in those acquittals.
It's certainly possible. The Chicago outfit, they had their hands in a lot of things, including the justice system. Witnesses could be intimidated. Evidence could disappear. Judges could be persuaded.
So basically, money and power could buy you freedom, even from murder charges.
In some cases, yeah. That was the reality back then.
So we've got this complicated guy, a successful businessman, a military leader, and allegedly a cold-blooded killer. And he's seemingly operating with total impunity, all thanks to his powerful friends.
It paints a pretty vivid picture of Chicago in that era, doesn't it? A city where the lines between legitimate business, politics, and organized crime were really blurry, where ambition and ruthlessness were often the keys to success.
And we're just getting started with Barron's story. His appearance at the Kafer hearings in the 1950s, that put him right in the national spotlight, exposing his ties to guys like John Roselli, another top figure in the Chicago outfit, with connections to Hollywood, no less.
Right, the KFOF hearings. Those were a real turning point. They showed everyone just how widespread organized crime was.
Yeah.
Across America. And it sparked a lot of public anger and calls for reform.
So Barron, with all his secrets and connections, he's suddenly front-page news. I bet that made things pretty uncomfortable for him and his pals.
I'd imagine so.
So what did these hearings actually reveal about Barron's role in the Chicago outfit?
They showed that he was more than just a local player. This guy was connected to some of the biggest names in organized crime, guys who operated on a national, even international level. And his connection to John Roselli, well, that suggests a link to Hollywood, a whole other world of glamour and power that was also deeply tied to the mob.
So we're not just talking gambling and politics anymore. We're talking Hollywood, maybe even connections to Washington. This is getting deeper than I thought. So it's wild. This guy Barron, connected to all these powerful people, industries. We've got the Chicago politics, the alleged murders, even those hints about national security.
It was a lot.
But then the story takes like a total left turn. He ends up in pre-revolution Cuba.
Cuba.
Yeah, managing Meyer Lansky's casino, the Havana Riviera.
Huh. That's interesting. You know, this move to Cuba back in the 50s, it really shows how things were changing for organized crime.
How so?
Well, Havana back then, it
Yep.
was like the place to be. For gambling, it attracted the wealthy, the powerful, from all over the world.
So instead of just, running things in Chicago, these guys like Barron and Lansky, they were going global.
Exactly. They saw Havana as, well, it was a glamorous escape, but also a place where the rules were, let's say, a little looser.
And the profits?
Oh, the profits were huge. The Havana Riviera, under Barron's management, it became a symbol of that era. Hollywood stars, mob bosses, even international politicians.
Wow, imagine that. Sinatra at the roulette wheel, mobsters making deals in those smoky back rooms, all under the Cuban sun.
Yeah. Sounds like something out of a movie, doesn't it?
It does. But then, of course, the Cuban Revolution happens in 1959.
Yeah.
And everything changes. What happened to Barron and the Havana Riviera?
Castro, he shut down all the casinos.
Makes sense.
He saw them as, symbols of corruption, foreign influence. So guys like Barron, they had to adapt again. And he set his sights on, well, a new opportunity, Las Vegas.
Las Vegas, of course.
Yep. He became one of the first people to get a gaming license under that 1960 Gaming Control Act.
That was the law that basically tried to make the casino industry in Nevada legitimate.
Exactly. It aimed to attract legitimate investors and, try to weed out the mob's influence.
But it sounds like guys like Barron, with all their connections and experience, they still managed to find a way in to the Las Vegas scene.
Oh, they did. They were experts at navigating those shifting landscapes.
And Barron, he landed right on his feet. He became the official greeter at the Sands Hotel and Casino.
The Sands. That was run by another big name in organized crime, Joseph Doc Stacher.
So even with all the changes, Barron always seemed to be right in the middle of things.
Like he had a knack for it, staying close to the centers of power, no matter how the world of organized crime was changing.
And being the greeter at the Sands, that must have put him in contact with a whole new cast of characters.
Oh, absolutely. Hollywood celebrities, high rollers, and of course, all the big players in the Las Vegas underworld.
Yeah.
It's amazing. This one guy, from the back rooms of Chicago to the casinos of Havana, and then the glitz and glamour of Las Vegas. It's like he lived through like 3 different lifetimes.
He was definitely a witness to a really fascinating period of American history.
He was. But with all these seemingly successful ventures, did Barron ever face any real consequences? I mean, we've talked about the murders, the gambling, the political stuff. It seems like he got away with a lot.
Yeah, that's a question that people are still asking.
What do you think?
Well, some people say he was this master manipulator.
Yeah.
Able to avoid justice because of his wealth, his connections, maybe even intimidation.
Makes sense.
But then others think he was more of a middleman, a facilitator, someone who benefited from his associations, but wasn't really involved in the more brutal side of things.
Was he a puppet master or a pawn, a brilliant strategist, or just a really lucky guy?
It's tough to say for sure. The historical record, it's not always complete. And guys like Barron, who operated in the shadows, they're even harder to figure out.
Yeah, I guess so, but it seems like he was really good at reinvention, adapting to each new situation, each new opportunity.
And that adaptability, that ability to navigate those shifting tides of power and influence, I think that's the key to understanding him. He started in that tough Chicago environment, found success in Havana, and then landed on his feet again in Las Vegas.
It's almost like he had this sixth sense for where the money and power were going.
Maybe he did.
Mm.
But that instinct for survival, that ability to anticipate change and adapt, that's probably why he thrived in a world where a lot of other people failed.
It's really incredible how his life, it's like a reflection of the evolution of organized crime itself, starting with those local rackets and then expanding into these global operations, always looking for new opportunities for profit and influence.
It is. And as we learn more about him, we uncover more layers, more complexities. It just raises more questions about his true motives, the extent of his influence.
He's a hard guy to categorize, you know, leaves us with more questions than answers.
He does. But that's what makes exploring his life so fascinating.
It is. So what does all of this tell us about power, the desire for wealth, the compromises people make?
Those are questions that are still relevant today as we deal with the legacy of organized crime and how it's impacted our society. The story of Charles Bay Barron. It gives us a glimpse into this complex and often shadowy world where ambition, greed, and violence were all tangled up with the American dream.
It's a reminder that the past isn't really over and done with. It still affects us today.
It does. And by exploring those echoes of the past, we can gain some valuable insights into how our world came to be.
We've covered a lot of ground today in our deep dive into the life of Charles Bay Barron. From Chicago to Havana to Las Vegas, it's been a wild ride.
It has.
So, what are your final thoughts as we wrap up our look at this enigmatic figure? Is crazy, right? How this guy Barron, he navigated all these crazy times. The Chicago gang wars, the Cuban Revolution, the rise of Vegas. He always seemed to land on his feet.
Yeah, it's remarkable. He had this resilience, this ability to adapt to change. That's not something you see every day.
It makes you wonder what drove him. Was it ambition, power, or just a need to survive?
Maybe all the above. He was clearly a man with big goals, but he was also, practical. He knew how to use his connections, find the weak spots, and position himself for success, no matter what was happening around him.
And let's not forget, this was a guy who wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. We've talked about the murders, the gambling rings, all the political maneuvering. It seems like he crossed a lot of lines to get what he wanted.
Yeah, his story definitely raises some questions about the price of success, the compromises we make, the lines we cross to achieve our goals. These are questions that, they go beyond organized crime. They apply to all of us.
It's like that saying, the ends justify the means. But with Barron, it seems like, the means were often pretty ruthless.
They were. And yet, he managed to avoid any serious consequences. For most of it, he died a wealthy man, respected by some, and his darker side, mostly forgotten, or dismissed as just rumors.
It makes you think about justice. Did he ever really pay for the things he did? Or did his money, his connections, protect him?
I don't know. Those are questions that we might never have the answers to. But they do make us think about power, influence, and how they can be used to manipulate the system, escape accountability.
Barron's life, it's like a puzzle. With some pieces missing, we see bits and pieces, his actions, connections, his rise to power. But we don't get the whole picture.
And that's part of the mystery. It draws you in. It makes you want to fill in the blanks, speculate, come to your own conclusions based on what we do know.
Yeah, it shows that history. It's not always clear-cut. It can be messy, contradictory, and sometimes the most interesting stories are the ones that leave us with more questions than answers.
That's true.
Well, I think we can all agree, we've only scratched the surface here, of Charles Bay Barron's life. He was a man of contradictions, someone who walked that line between legitimacy and crime. And his story, it continues to fascinate, intrigue.
It does.
He was a fascinating guy. But we got to leave it there for today. So to everyone listening, I encourage you to keep digging, learn more about organized crime, the history of gambling, the whole world of politics and power. That shaped 20th century America.
It's a fascinating journey.
It is. And as you explore, remember to question everything. Look for different perspectives. Embrace the complexity of history.
Because sometimes the most important discoveries are the ones that challenge our assumptions, make us rethink what we thought we knew.
Exactly. So keep exploring, keep asking questions,
and
keep diving deep.
We'll be here, ready for the next adventure.